Welcome to Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust board meeting for January. Welcome everybody. Hope you all had some time to relax over Christmas and New Year, and welcome back. Apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. I haven't been notified of any changes. If there are any changes to be made, please let Jenny Jones know. And if there's any issues where there's a conflict, please raise that, and if necessary, remove yourself for that item. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November. Can I check if there are an accurate record of our meeting held on the 30th of November? Any changes? Nope. Thank you very much. Can we approve those minutes? All in agreement? Thank you very much. Moving on to the action log and matters arising. Are there any issues that colleagues would like to raise on this item? No, thank you very much indeed. Just to say, some of you are aware that for the patient story, our colleagues are coming. Oh, sorry, Hilary.
Sorry, I just couldn't quite get it on quick enough. Just on the action log where it's got about the update around the Edenfield, it's got February. It's coming to the March board because that's when we next meet again. So we just need to change that, please.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thanks very much, Hilary, for flagging that. I can't see anybody else, so if we can move on. On the patient story, the colleagues are coming at 10 o'clock for that item. So we'll carry on with the agenda and then we'll go back to the item when they arrive. You have my chair's report for this board meeting. Are there any questions? Francis.
Sorry, the board public work plan, just a minor point. Obviously, we've now moved to 2 monthly. We haven't got May and July on there yet, but there's a lot of reports that normally come in May and June because of the year end, etc. And we just need to make sure that those two agendas suddenly don't get very, very busy, because we'll have to try and put all of June into either May or July. And again, there needs to be clarity on what is coming to board, because at the bottom, it clearly says, obviously, that there's been some removed items. For example, the estate strategy. And I know the estate strategy is going to be coming to board, even though it's on there as being removed, because it's a refresh of the strategy. So we just need to be really mindful about what's coming in May and July.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that, Francis. Perhaps if I could ask Stella and Jenny, what might be helpful is just to have a bit of a grid of the different reports and what their deadlines are to come to a board meeting, to see how we can make sure they're allocated, and just that as chair, I just have a bit of heads up of how we're going to manage that because of our new cycle of meetings. If we can take that as an action point, that would be really helpful. Is that all right with everybody? Great. Thanks, Francis. Going back to the agenda, my report, chair's report. Are there any, it's all there in the written report. Are there any questions or comments on that from anybody? Nope. Right, we'll move on. Chief Exec's report. Michelle.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I trust people have had a chance to look at the report. I'll pick out, as usual, just a couple of items, and then my colleagues can come in as required. Just to say, apologies, I missed off the front sheet. There is a policy to ratify, which we can come on to, which is the Associate Hospital Managers Policy, and there's some terms of reference to approve as we go through. We'll come on to the system pressures. I will let Lynn give us just a bit of an update on the system pressures and the industrial action. Suffice to say, the system has coped well. Sorry, Francis, do you want to come in?
No, sorry.
I think it's a legacy hand.
No, it just flashed up, so I didn't. That's fine.
Right,
sorry. Okay. So the system has coped well. There were extremely regular meetings and escalation meetings all the way through, including the Integrated Care Board itself met on a weekly basis, which even whilst on leave I dialed into, and it really showed that the partnership working across the system. But I'll let Lynn give you a bit more of an update in relationship to how we cope. But I thank all staff, because even though we had no nurses striking, obviously York and others around us did. So, but we did do a really great business continuity plan. I do thank Lynn and the team for that. But Lynn will give us an update, and I thank all staff involved. So going on to the report, I do want to pick out, obviously we've got our backdrop on the 28 days of wellness. This is something that we've really motoring on in relationship to January, just to give people a bit of a boost. We've got something coming into the inboxes every day. We've got random draws for people, because it's about just trying to keep ourselves healthy and well as we get into the real middle part of winter, which is always a really difficult time after Christmas. And it builds on our health and wellbeing work that we do constantly throughout the year. The initial feedback on the campaign is it's gone exceptionally well. People are really enjoying the lunchtime sessions of fitness, the afternoon sessions of mindfulness, and we will take some of that back and see if we can link some of that into more regular programmed activities. So it's a really useful piece of work for us as well. But I thank the communications team and the wellness group as well, the health and wellbeing group. I do want to draw attention to a couple of CQC reports, one for the show and clinic. This is obviously with our commissioning arm, because I really want to thank the team, the collaborative commissioning team, Quality and Hillary and others for the work that they've done on taking the show and clinic from inadequate to good across the board in a very short space of time. And I think there's some real lessons that we can share wider on that, about how we've managed to work in partnership with the show and clinic to develop that. And I think that's a really good, positive demonstration of the collaborative commissioning work. So thank everybody involved with that. And also our Humber Primary Care Limited have got a good result from the CQC as well, which again is fantastic, but I'll leave people to read that. We are the integrated care system has been awarded the front runner for the discharge scheme. This is about discharge and facilitating discharge. It is predominantly bed-based and acute-based, but we are seeing how we as a community and integrated provider of mental health can feed into that. So more information on that as that develops, but that's a really positive for the integrated care system and everybody in care at the moment. The interviews that were raised there in relationship to NLAG and HUF have been postponed. More on that later, but as I say, that's not going ahead at the moment. The Respect campaign, which is in Steve's report, I think that's a really important piece of work. This is around how we continue to build on our cultural journey. If you remember, we've done Being Humber, we've done lots of things throughout the years in relationship to Proud, health and wellbeing, facilitative engagement of staff. The Respect programme builds on that, and that currently they're looking at all our policy procedures to see how that fits in with developing that campaign. And I'm sure Steve can add to that if required. There's also the mention of the engagement work with the King's Fund. This is around wider engagement, not just within our organisation, but wider. We're a key partner in that, and Mandy Dawley and Kwame are leading that work. There's lots in my report about the digital, because I do really want us to focus as a board a bit more this year on digital and the digital work that we're doing. We're a digital aspirant site. And I think we need to utilise the digital technologies. We are using it. I think we need to just maybe do a little bit more work on that. There's a lot of work going on, and maybe Pete wants to add to that. That new HQ is going exceptionally well, the Blend and Thrive project. And in fact, we had a visit from the integrated care core team. The chair visited and was really impressed with our facilities, how we've arranged it, and we will be having some integrated care board meetings in our facilities as well. I'm not going to dwell on the planning guidance because that's on the agenda, as there's a lot of other things. There's a detailed communication report there and a detailed health stars report. I'll pause there, Chair, just to remind us about the policy in the terms of reference, but I'll hand over to my colleagues if there's anything they wish to add, and then obviously I'll throw it out for questions.
Thanks, Michelle. Anybody else like to, from the EMT, would like to make a contribution on at this point? Lynn?
Yes, if you don't mind, Chair, I will just touch on some of the pressures and the plans to address those over recent weeks. As Michelle's already said, we have the ongoing position around general high levels of demand across our system. And then obviously we had planned for the impact of industrial action across our system in the trust and with our system partners. I think, as Michelle says, we planned well. Our plan did stand up to scrutiny. We put a number of additional measures in place, particularly in relation to the ambulance strikes, and they worked well. So we saw very little, if any, disruption to our services. We stood up our Silver Command to manage the strike days. Obviously, there's future days planned, as well, and we'll continue to do that. Our own pressures are at that OPOR sort of 2-3 position at the moment. So overall, I think we can demonstrate that our plan and our winter planning has been effective so far, but obviously it's still January, so there's still time to go as well. We'll keep on reviewing and revising those business continuity plans as we need to. But thank you, just to give a bit of an overview.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Questions or comments from board? Stuart.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very interested in this report as ever, particularly in the reference to the team, the community mental health team, which supports people into employment. And there's a statistic of helping 55 service users into paid employment. I was interested because I had a quick look at the relative cost of supporting people into employment. And I found some reasonably old data to see if this service was cost effective. My initial conclusion was it probably looks pretty good. But my question is whether do we measure the cost effectiveness of supporting people into employment? There's a measure that can be used, the cost of getting someone into a job as an outcome. If we don't, it might be worth considering, because it's just another reflection of our kind of value for money story. But on the face of it, from the data I could find, look good, and that does mean that 55 people have got paid employment, which is a great outcome, I think.
Thank you, Stuart. Lynn, would you pick this up? Is this for you?
Yes, thank you, Stuart. So this team is part of a national programme. So there's been an extent of national evaluation, Stuart, as you would expect of a programme of this type. Obviously, we do our own evaluation, but I do think it connects with that wider longer term health inequalities piece. As part of the KPIs for this service, we continue to measure for some while as well, whether indeed those folk that have moved into paid employment stay in employment. As well. So I think that's really quite important. The team is actually relatively small, sort of around 5 whole-time equivalent
4 or 5
staff.
people, I think, yeah.
Yeah, working with a caseload typically of around sort of 80 service users at any one time. So I think in that respect, given the KPIs are quite stringent nationally, and I put this in the report because we've actually just had an external fidelity review, which demonstrated that our team is even more compliant than the previous review with the overall ambitions of the programme and the KPIs. But it's something we'll continue to look at, Stuart. It's a really good point.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Mike. Oh, sorry, Francis.
Thanks, Chair.
Then
a couple of points. The first one was on the discharge front run, and not for now, but it would be good to hear a bit more about that. Looks really interesting, and it'd be good to hear a bit more about how we're going to do it, and then maybe a regular update on that at some stage. In Lynn's winter plan, again, something I'll be interested in hearing a bit more about is this new service proposal around the working with Huft over the road and the enhanced environment for those presenting with mental health. It sounds really interesting. So that's due in April, is it, Lynn?
It is, Francis, the only, and we're just waiting for the identified estate to be ready for us to move into. We've actually mobilised the staffing already and actually developed the standard operating procedure. So we've got everything ready to go. We just need the space, and Huft are working hard on that with us. So it's great that is progressing.
Excellent. I wanted to say, Michelle raised it, but a great result on the CQC visit. So congratulations to the whole team on that. And my other one was at 4.5. Let me just get down to it. 4.5.3. Which was the point I made earlier about the strategy update, clicking into the agendas in May and July, because obviously the strategy is assessed at or monitored at Finance and for a committee after it's been to EMT, but we've got it down as coming to the March board, which obviously doesn't exist, so it would have to come to either May or July.
Thank you, Francis. Eagle-eyed as ever. Thank you for that. Anybody who'd like to come back on any of the points Francis made? Pete,
Have we not got a board in March? Have I missed it?
we have got a board in March.
Oh, it is March, isn't it? Sorry, it is
Yeah.
March. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Correct.
March.
Strategic in February, March board.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We'll take away those other points about some more information about the discharge and the enhanced environment, and try and find some space to provide more information on that. Michelle, did you want to come in before I take Mike?
Yeah, just a couple of things
Okay.
that we've mentioned. They're in the chat, but just to reiterate, I think yes, there is a match, Bob. But also, I think Pete's put down about digital, because I mentioned digital in my presentation. I think it's great if the board, the chair, think we should do that in April. I think we could pick up a bit more of that agenda in April. And just to refer to Stuart's comment, great comment about obviously employment, etc. It links into our social values report as well, which is in further on in the agenda. And we're trying to get a little bit, and maybe we can pick this up when we get to the agenda item, maybe about how we actually do a bit more costing on that. Because we've put some financials in, but it's really difficult. So maybe we can have another conversation when we get down to the item further down the agenda. I think it's item 11.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mike.
Just one minor point and one substantive point on associate hospital managers. The minor one is that you've got the generic description of the rate, the sessional rate, and then you've got 56 pence per mile within the policy. It's in brackets. I just delete that 56 pence because if it changes, then you have to reapprove the policy again. So it's only a bracketed take, just take that out. The substantive point, first of all, thank you to Lynn Parkinson for arranging the diversity group and pulling all of that together. Some fantastic work there. The culmination of that work is this preliminary interview of 2 prospective hospital managers. Well, if you look at the policy, the non-exec has a role in that. So I am free on February the 7th. But if it's a preliminary one and then a final one, can someone just work on securing my involvement on that, please? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And Mike, thanks for all the work you do with the associate hospital manager as well. I know you put a lot of time into it and appreciate it. I'm ably supported by others, I know, but you do put a lot of time into this particular role. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any more hands up. Nope. So Francis.
Just a minor point. Michelle mentioned the policy, and as part of that, I just wonder what the change to the NED roles was within that policy that's mentioned.
Michelle?
I'll pass that over to Mark if Mike wants to answer that, or Kwame. It's
Kwame, sorry, yes, thank you, Kwame.
I think it's when we did a policy initially, it was the NED was almost like it sounded like the associate medical hospital managers were accountable to the lead NED, whereas it should be to the board. So all their roles are almost to the board. So that's the kind of change we did to make sure that it's not to an individual, but to the board.
Is that okay with Francis? It's basically, is it not to focus on one individual NED in terms of their role, but to the board? But also, I think within it is that that it's delegated to the clinical manager, isn't it?
Yes.
The accountability of to the trust via that route as well, isn't it, rather than the NED? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a clarification of roles, Francis, and I'm perfectly happy with what's written in there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I cannot see any other hands up. So if we can move, I think, to ratify the policy changes for the associate hospital managers policy. Is everyone happy with that? And the other area is to approve some of the changes to the collaborative committee, which is at the back. Are there any questions on that? Happy with that? Great, thank you very much. Let's move on to publications and highlights report. Michelle?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, I will take it as read. This is the usual regular update in relationship to the main items that have come through in relationship to policy and changes, and we've identified the lead director, and they've given a bit of comment about how we're taking forward the particular policies and procedures. Obviously a lot on the joint forward plan and operational guidance, as you would expect at this time of year. Also important is the UIT review, which we did respond to. I think I've sent out some information on that further, but it's there for information, Chair. I'll take any comments and questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? No, thank you very much, Michelle. Pete, if you could go on to the performance report, please.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I'll try and keep it brief so we've got time for questions. So this is a report of month 9 in the usual format. The bits I would put out in this month's report is we've got the detailed waiting times appendix because we're on the quarterly version of the report, so that's there for information. You'll see that the reg ratings of the safer staffing dashboard have been reviewed for care hours per patient day based on a report that we reviewed at EMT. Obviously, delayed transfers of care continues to be a problem, but then we'll probably elaborate more on the conversations that are taking place at system level. And I think we should note the continued positive performance on Statman training. So, quick highlight from me. I think best to move to questions.
Thanks very much, Pete. Pete, your audio is crackling a little bit.
I think it's this background, Caroline. I'll get my headphones.
Don't blame the background. Right. Okay. Any questions to Pete on the performance report? I'm looking around. Stuart.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always interested in the patterns of the graphs, and some of them go in the right direction, some of them not. I posed a question to Lynn yesterday about buying in spare capacity from independent providers. Lynn, perhaps could you comment on that? And it's in relation to, where are we? The adult ADHD position. Yeah. So that's on page 110 of the pack for the eagle-eyed. So my question was really about if we see trends in rising waiting lists, to what extent can we go and if you like purchase spare capacity, and to what extent is that approach stymied by simply the lack of supply out there to buy from? That was sort of the gist of my question.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Thanks for raising the question. So we're working with 3 providers across adult ADHD, children's ADHD and ASD. And a couple of those providers actually work with both adults and with children. So if we, based on the data that the report is indicating, Stuart, obviously we've been refreshing our capacity and demand modelling work around these areas really in a very close sort of monitoring focused way and revising the position as the narrative suggests. So we've done a piece of work at the moment across all of those areas, really looking at what we need to have in place for next year, next financial year going forward. How much of that will be across those 3 areas, in-house provision, and how much of that will be through those independent providers. So we are getting to a position where that is near finalised now, and obviously we're having conversations with our commissioners around that through the current planning round that we're just entering into now. So some of it is cost per case, Stuart, and actually it's right. And adult ADHD does lend itself probably more to a cost per case position. We do know that some of these providers have got more volume that they could give to us. We have quite rightly, I think, approached it fairly cautiously, where we had a provider that sort of overpromised and underdelivered, and we don't want to be in that position going forward. So taking that all into account, I can assure you we have a fairly detailed plan now that we are enacting for the beginning of next year, and we're just finalising through the commissioning processes.
Yeah, thanks very much. It does seem to me that this whole notion of how the system can work more effectively under the new arrangements to create supply where it doesn't exist is a really important thing to keep our eye on. I hear quite a lot of that kind of discussion in the collaborative committee work that I look after. So thanks for that, Lynn. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next up, I have Francis.
Thanks, Chair. Just two minor ones. I know it's only 1 month, but on the clinical supervision, it's a really big drop from 95% down to more or less 85%. I was just wondering what had caused that to click in.
Can I respond to that? Obviously it's December, you can see the sickness has gone up as well in December. We've got the bank holidays over the Christmas period, so some of the supervisions obviously were delayed. It actually represents 14 teams out of 122 that didn't respond in time, so we're still compliant, but I think it's just a blip with that Christmas period and sickness, as I say, and leave and the bank holidays.
Okay. And my other one is, yeah, that's fine. My other one was just a comment. If we look at the staff turnover rolling 12 months, it's just a slow but steady, inexorable rise from just below 11. Now it's up to 15. It's just a point. I know we pick it up in Workforce Committee, but the turnover is just slowly but steadily rising, isn't it?
Dee?
Yeah, it is, Francis. Yeah, and as you say, we talk about it in more depth there, but as we kind of predicted, we expected to see turnover increase coming out of COVID, and that's what we're kind of experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, despite all the good work which we get acknowledgement from the staff for, which is great from the team, it just is disappointing that it's just continually to rise. That's all.
Yeah. And I suppose the interesting would be on terms of exit interviews is where people are going. Okay. Michelle, did you want to add anything to that before I bring in Philip?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Francis, but we are doing a lot of work in relationship to retention, and we do need to look at the reasons. And I think, one of the things that the Workforce Committee will pick up is the reasons for that. I mean, obviously, sometimes we have blocks of people that leave because that's part of the training programme as well, which you'll see blips of. But we do take your point, and we have had some conversations about that in the executive management team. One of the things I think that's important is to look at our retirements as well, because obviously we've got a really heavy. Need to be very careful. I said this politely. Older workforce, I think, and that reflected in a lot of NHS organisations, especially from a clinical point of view. So we need to look at that and make sure that we do get a lot of retiring returns as well, but they're obviously classed as a leaver as well, and then they come back. So we just need to be a bit cognizant of that as well. But yeah, we're constantly looking at the reasons why, because it's not just about retracting staff and bringing staff in, as we know we've done quite a good job at that. It's about keeping staff as well. So that's why, as the chair said, the exit reviews are really important, but also looking at that age profile as well and how we can make the jobs that are continue to be attractive for our older work colleagues as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of focusing in on long waits, because obviously the NHS operating plan wants us to recover well. So page 100, we're looking at 52-week waits. We've talked a little bit about adult and children's ADHD, which are both still increasing. Could you just tell us a little bit about the adult dietetics and paediatric dietetics in Vale of York, because that should never happen? Is it just a data issue?
Yes, Philip, we do have some dietetic vacancies. Recruiting dietetics is quite challenging currently. We are having a look at that, obviously, and doing a range of things to attract staff. So that's partly what's contributing to the position. But there was a significant issue with backlog through COVID, but we are addressing that, Philip. And again, we're applying our capacity demand modelling work. We're also looking at skill mix opportunities in dietetics, as well as new roles to improve the position there. So I think it's certainly one going forward that we're pretty optimistic we can and will see improvement with.
It was just that basically, if people are waiting for 2 weeks, they either they don't need to be on the waiting list, or we've let them down badly. So it's the sort of type of service that should be zero.
I don't disagree, Philip, but actually I'm not, but actually we're not an outlier. Dietetic waiting times are an issue across most community services nationally. Yeah. However, as we do all of our waiting times, obviously we are in contact with all patients on our waiting lists, and we are clinically prioritising those service users that do need to be seen soon and urgently, as you would expect us to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that it's an area of difficulty, but we just need to be realistic what our offer is if we haven't got the staff, so that we don't give people a false hope of some input.
Sort of managing expectations in this of people, isn't it? Maybe Philip and Lynn can also carry this conversation off online, and follow up. I think that would be helpful as well. Thanks for that question, Philip and Lynn, your answer. Now I cannot see any more hands up, so I think we can move on, because we have here Craig and Dave, who are part of our patient story today. Craig, welcome to the board this morning. Thank you so much for coming along to share your experience. And I know we've got Dave here as well, who is the service user and lead carer lead for the East Riding programme. Kwame, did you want to just say something before we hand over to Craig? And Craig, please, don't be put off by all these faces staring at you this morning. We are a friendly bunch, and we're really, proud to have you here with us this morning. Kwame.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to welcome Craig, who is a service user and a volunteer, with Dave, who is worked with the East Riding Addiction team, who is supporting him. I think without stealing his thunder, I think Craig is had addiction issues since age 16, and he does have a significant impact on his life. Fortunately, he is achieving recovery, and he's also giving something back by being a volunteer. Craig, I would like to welcome you to the board to share your journey and your story with us. Thank you very much, and we do appreciate that.
Thanks, Kwame. Over to you, Craig.
Okay, so my name's Craig McLean. I'm 50 years of age. I've had long-standing addiction problems, stemming back from, my early childhood. My father died when I was 3, and then my grandfather when I was 5, leaving my mum and my gran in a state of grief, and both my mum and gran turned to alcohol. So as a child, I watched this and probably contributed to me copying behaviours. When I was 14, I had alcohol problems. Probably from 13 to 14, I was drinking every weekend and on any occasion that I could possibly. I ended up in prison for a serious assault when I was 14. That was fueled from alcohol. One of my friends tried to punch my mum, and we all had knives on us, and someone was unfortunately cut, and myself was as well. So I went to prison for that when I was 14 for about 3 months, and I came out. Eventually I was sentenced to 15 months detention when I was 15 years of age. I must add, I seriously regret the assault charge that happened. And when I was in prison, that's when I was introduced to drugs when I was 15. And I served my sentence in prison using drugs now and again with cellmates mainly. And when I came out of prison when I was 15, I decided that where I lived in Scotland was quite a violent area and there was a lot of crime going on. I decided to move to England to my family that lived here. So I moved to England when I was about 17, and over the years in England I gained jobs. I done quite well for a while, I would often resort back to negative behaviours, alcohol, and then drugs again, leading me to offending behaviour and ending up in prison a few times. I eventually ended up in prison for the last time in 1998, and once I served 18 months. That was a dishonest charge of robbery that was fueled from drug addiction. When I was in prison, I went to a drug-free wing to seek help. I was given a key worker, a drug worker, and I done a course, a 12-week course, and called the RAP course. I think it's the Minnesota method to use. And I stayed in the drug-free wing for the next year and done pretty well. So when I came out in 1999, I was doing quite well for a little bit. I got a job, lost my job, and again, I ended up back addicted to alcohol and drugs. In 2003, I approached the East Riding Partnership, where I was put on an opiate replacement course. And from 2003, I've predominantly been clean from all opiates, apart from two little blips, one in 2007 when my mum died, and when I had a nervous breakdown in 2012. I had a nervous breakdown in 2012, and since then I've received opiate replacement again in 2013, and I've been clean ever since then. I've had a lot of help off the East Riding Partnership, so I've just been on my methadone for a long time now. It has enabled me to live a normal life as much as anyone else can, apart from I have to go to the chemist once a week to collect my supervised prescription. I've been very grateful for that, and I've received a lot of support from my various key workers over the years. I've had mental health issues. I feel maybe I've been using methadone as a mental health drug to calm my anxiety and depression. So I'm at this stage now where everything is good in my life. I'm married, been married for 5 years now. I have a little boy who's 3 years of age, who's my pride and joy, and I have two gorgeous stepchildren. So my life's going really well. I'm in the position at the moment where I'm volunteering, trying to give something back to the East Riding Partnership, who's helped me a lot. And I'm hoping that the volunteering I'm doing will help and aid my own recovery to eventually be free of prescription methadone. So I'm looking at starting a reduction sometime in the spring while I continue volunteering with the East Riding Partnership, and maybe look into if there's something I can give to this, maybe looking for employment along the lines of being a recovery worker in the future, possibly. And I've been enjoying very much the process. I've done lots of training. I've done, I think, about 7 courses in training now, which is really good. And I've been working at the West Hub in Goole, and I've been connecting quite well with the staff there. They're really friendly and nice, and the patients I've met last week, I've been connecting with them. I feel a good feeling from being able to help someone, being able to share my experiences with them, and I receive a lot of support from Dave and Martin and the Changes group. They've been fantastic. All the training they're putting me through and give me this opportunity. So I'm not really sure what else I can say really, but yeah, that's roughly about it, I think. Sorry.
There we go. Unmute myself. Thanks very much, Craig, for sharing your story. And I think you know what it reveals is just how, you know, dealing with addiction is a hard journey, and actually it doesn't always go smoothly. But I think, you know, having an organisation and individuals to help you be able to deal with that and get back on track is, you know, came through in terms of what you said. And thanks for sharing that with all of us this morning. I don't know if Dave wants to just add anything before we open up for people. I'm sure people want to ask questions, and thank you for being with us this morning. Dave, did you want to say anything as
just
the
that
lead
I'd like
in this
to,
area?
Sorry, yeah, I'd just like to thank Craig for that. It was great for him to be so open, wasn't it, and honest about his journey. And he's a great addition to our volunteer team as well. We've already seen how we integrate him with patients and staff, so we look forward to him being with us quite a while, but I'm sure at some point he'll be stolen by by the trust and be working with an East Riding partnership. We can already see it. And that's about it, unless there's questions about what we do and everything like that.
Thanks, Dave, to you and all the team at East Riding. Thank you. So let's open up to any questions or comments. Dean.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I'm Dean. I'm one of the non-executive directors, and someone's put in the chat room there. Just thank you for sharing your story this morning. I think that must have taken some courage. It was great to see your openness and frankness and the way that you'd reflected upon that journey. There's been a lot, hasn't there, about the criminal justice system, I think, in the media recently, and this is a powerful account, I think, of a personal interaction with that system. That I think is quite moving. So thank you for sharing that story so well. I just wondered just about the volunteering and that desire to seek employment. I guess we have people that volunteer, you know, that have finished work and want to contribute. I just wonder, is it helping you be prepared for employment? Is there more that we could be doing in that volunteering journey that would make employment more likely for you? Any improvements we could make?
Actually, I've been extremely impressed. While I was waiting for all my CPR checks and different things to come through, I've done a peer mentor course, and Dave has also put me through. He's recommended me for training. I've done so much training over the last year. It's been fantastic. Lots of things that I didn't know much about, like steroid awareness, about novel current issues in novel drugs, substances, psychoactive substances, and just all the various different courses I've been on, about equal opportunities and diversity. It's really been preparing me for if I'm looking for a job in the recovery sort of industry. It's been really good, to be honest. Yeah,
that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanif.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Craig, for having the courage to share that story. It's really inspirational. It's really picking up on Dean's point, and it might be to both Dave and Craig, in that whilst we recognise that clinical and medical intervention is always important, that actually the intervention and getting this balance right between something like that and volunteering and training opportunities in an individual's rehabilitation journey might be something that we can actually take some learning from. And as I say, both to Dave and Craig, whether there's any learning for us as a trust where we get that balance right in a better way, where the opportunity is right to have that type of intervention as opposed to solely relying on clinical and medical types of support.
I think, as Craig has said there, for him, because Craig is still actually a patient within East Riding Partnership as well, while he before he undertakes his reduction. But it is that training that has prepared Craig as well. I think Craig he has agreed that there's his recovery, the clinical side, but the cognitive behaviour therapy that we've done through some of the peer mentor training that we've done, looking at smart recovery, which is something we use in East Riding Partnership, which is an alternative to AA and NA. So it's just that it's that training, building up on people's skills, isn't it? Because a lot of people during their addiction, they've lost their skills, especially problem solving, and it's building on all those past skills, I think, really.
Okay, thank you. Lynn.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I was going to pick up on the areas that my colleagues have covered, Craig. But Craig, I'm Lynn Parkinson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with the Trust, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Very brave of you to do that as well. And Dave, good to see you again. It sounds like, Craig, that you might well have used some of the resources through the Recovery College as well. So if not, Dave, that might be something to link up with. We're always looking for feedback about the Recovery College as well, and what more that we can do through that route to support people into paid employment. So if there is anything there, Dave, Craig, very happy to pick that up outside of the meeting. I did have another thought as well, Craig. We've just started supporting a new service into prisons locally, and one of the things we're thinking about at the minute is that peer support type role within that service. If you were willing, Craig, and I'm always thinking about connections between services and how we can, make the most of the opportunities that we've got. Dave, Craig, it might be again helpful to have a bit of a conversation offline about, it sounds like your experiences would be perfect for some of the work that we're doing there, Craig, and again, opportunities within that service around that sort of peer support worker role as well. So very happy to have a conversation if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, yeah.
Thanks, Lynn. And I was just going to ask, actually, just following on from Lynn there, just, how have things improved in terms of the, what happens in prison and then going into community? Because with another hat on, I used to do some work in this area, and one of the issues was sometimes, as you described, Craig, you might be able to be on a drug-free wing within the prison and get support there, but when you leave prison, making sure that it's connected up with services outside isn't always necessarily so great. Is there any sense that that's improving?
Do you mind if I answer that, Craig?
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah. Yes, well, within East Riding Partnership, we've got our criminal justice service, so we do link in with local prisons and probation. So we pick people up from the minute that they're released from prison, and then also look at their housing status and all their needs really around that. We've also got our health inclusion van that goes around the East Riding as well, so we link in people who have been released from prison with that health inclusion van as well. If sadly they did come out and they're homeless, because once, sometimes that can happen. We've got our homeless outreach worker on the health inclusion van, so we quickly link them up with them and our criminal justice workers as well. So it's a good improvement, yeah. And the workers with the criminal justice service do go into the prison as well to do pre-release interviews.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Thanks, Dave. Michelle.
Yes, thanks, Dave. I'm sure I'm the chief exec, and thank you very much, Craig, for the really interesting and open and honest account. And I think it's really great to hear that. And I think we obviously need to continue to support you and build on that and utilise your experience across the organisation. So thanks for that. But I think Dave's answered the question really for me, because I think the other thing we need to do is make sure that there's some connectivity, not just within the organisation, but the wider system, because we're just doing a big piece of work on youth justice, and we've been given some money to develop avoidance type schemes, but also to work with experience. It might be Craig and Dave, something outside, building up on what Lynn was saying, that we link you into some of that collaborative system work that we're doing in relationship to youth justice. And I think it'd be really good to share some of Craig's experiences within that as well. But great work presentation, Craig, and thank you so much for sharing it. Really interested, and let's build on that and support you as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Craig, thank you so much for being with us this morning, as colleagues have said, and being so frank and open about your experience. But it was really positive as well to hear, you know, how you've engaged, actually, because without you engaging with our services and what's available, you know, that's half the battle. So thank you so much for that. And to the team at East Riding, you know, thank you again for all the work you're doing with people, including Craig, who clearly, you know, what you're offering is really helpful and appreciated. So thank you both, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you to Craig and Dave. Kwame, thank you for arranging that as well for our patient story today. What I'm going to do now, I haven't forgotten the finance report, but we've got Sarah with us, so I'm going to go straight into item 11, the social value report, and then we'll come back to the finance report after that. If that's okay with you, Sarah, welcome, Happy New Year. Over to you.
I want to say something first.
Oh, if you need, if you need to say something, Kwame, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for coming. I mean, I think this theme is follows on from what Craig was saying. So this is about social value report. I think the eagle eye, who have read the report, will realize that it's a bit late, but better late than never. This is due to the third transition of medical director from John to Michael to me. As an anchor institution, clearly what our inspiration is to help improve the health of our community, also to give opportunity or to make a positive impact on the economy, the community life, and the health of the population as well as the environment. So this social value report is to demonstrate how we reach beyond the core of our purpose of delivering high quality care. And I'm sure Sarah would expand on that. The report also showcased some of the outstanding examples. Of course, we could do more. And we're hoping that some of the stories from today and others, the other thing that we did was to try and see if we can put a financial quantity to some of the things that we do. We haven't got it right yet, but hopefully next year we could get better. There has been a lot of work gone into that. We're talking to a lot of staff and the leadership of. I want to mention the leadership of Rachel and Sarah for taking this work forward. Sarah, thank you very much, and I hand it over to you to expand on some of this work that has been done.
Okay, thank you, Kwame. Sarah.
So I'm just going to run quickly through how we brought this document together and some of the thinking behind it. As Kwame mentioned, Rachel Kirby led on a lot of this work, and she put together a working group of people from across the trust who were either known to have an interest in social values or they were working in areas such as procurement or our voluntary services where we knew there was they were likely to be delivering high social value. Our approach to the report was really based on anchor institutions thinking and also the work of the National Social Values Task Force, where it's trying to think about all those different aspects of the social value that we deliver, such as getting people into employment, being a good employer, our environmental impact, our impact on the local economy, really just trying to cast that net as wide as we could. And when we were thinking about the structure of the report, we reviewed several examples of social values reports from the public and from the private sector. And that led us to adopting a case study based approach, which allowed us to showcase examples of exemplary social values work from all across the trust. And I think as a result of that, the final report presents quite a rich narrative picture of our work. We structured it in line with the trust strategy goals. So we've done a section for each of the trust strategy goals and aligned the examples of really good social values activity that we uncovered with those goals. Where possible, we have quantified our impact, and the way that we did that was we looked at some recognised methodologies or multipliers. If anybody's interested in the background where we got some of that, I've got the notes of where we've taken that from. It's a complex thing trying to quantify social value. There are some recognised ways of doing it. There's a methodology called TOMS, which is produced from the National Social Value Task Force, but it doesn't cover everything we'd want to cover. So it was trying to find a balance between getting some quantification, but also retaining this really rich picture of what we do across the trust and making sure that we could tell that whole story. Moving forward to next year, which is upon us already, we're planning to work with teams to identify social values activities at a much earlier stage. So that'll help us to work with teams to collect much more detailed data, which will help us to quantify and create a more complete picture of our activity across the trust. And this process will actually start with the launch of this year's report, which is provisionally scheduled for the 23rd of February. So we'll hold an event which will showcase the stories from the report and share information about how other teams can tell their stories and how we can help them to attribute that value to them. So I'm happy to take any questions about the report or the development of it.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And are there any questions to Sarah on the report? I see Mike.
I read the report pre-meeting and I just wrote in my notes, social values report, love it in capital letters. It's really, really good. It's visual, it's great. There are perhaps some issues, if Caroline doesn't mention them, about font sizes and colours and things. Just wondered about accessibility, but the structure of the report, absolutely tremendous. You've got a really good base to build on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Sarah. I really enjoyed reading it. I love the picture of a sleeping baby. As someone who doesn't sleep well all the time, I had great envy for that little baby looking so peaceful on the pillow. Leaving that aside, I had a question about the sort of the veracity of the numbers, the basis of the number claims, and I think you've kind of answered that by referring to methodology. A couple of things I think I would want to see more of. In relation to workforce, perhaps a bit more on diversity. It isn't mentioned at all, as far as I could see. And I think we just had an item earlier in the meeting about supporting some of our service users into employment, which would be another great example that you could. I think I didn't see that in the report. And on sustainability related reporting, there's quite a large body of kind of reporting frameworks now emerging that we should keep our eye on. Which will just simply strengthen the kind of metrics that we could include in that element. But yeah, I thought it was a good read, well presented, and I like the combination of the narrative and the data and the pictures. So well done.
Thank you, Stuart. Hanif?
Well, yeah, just echo the comments of colleagues. As I say, a great report, really well presented. I was going to pick up on the diversity aspect Stuart has, so that's fine. The only other thing I could see is in terms of the section on communities, maybe something more around the role of the not-for-profit sector around social values. We sort of touch upon it. But there's nothing really expansive, and I know some of those organisations have played a really key part and will continue to do so, particularly in the current climate. So that's just a suggestion. It's not a criticism, because as I say, overall great report.
Thank you very much, Hanif. Anybody else with hands up? I've only got Hanif. Sarah, would you like to come back on some of those comments, please?
Yeah, some really, really good points in there. Thank you for the praise for the document, firstly. I think helping service users into employment, yes, we definitely need to put more in about that in a subsequent report. I think about the role of the not-for-profit sector. We know there are organisations that we work strongly in partnership with, and I think collecting more data about that would certainly strengthen it. I wanted to touch briefly on diversity and sustainability. We did talk about including both those elements, but we were quite conscious that we have a green plan which covers a lot of our sustainability, and that has a set of reporting. And we also do an equality, diversity and inclusion report. So we were, I think, conscious of the connections, but also conscious that we didn't want to duplicate, and maybe we haven't quite got the balance right between that.
Maybe there's something, Sarah, about, you know, actually just finding ways to weave into the commentary diversity, inclusion, you know, rather than necessarily a stand apart thing, because obviously you're right, we've got that separate report, but maybe just thinking about how that's woven into the narrative, you know, which I think actually is probably quite a good thing to do as well. I don't know if Hanif would agree with that. I think it's quite good to be part of the story. But yeah, maybe that's something to think about. Thanks, Sarah. Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, and thanks to Sarah, particularly for all Sarah's work and sticking with this, because this is been in a few different iterations and what have you. So thank you for that. And I think it's a great report, and I love the visual nature of it as well. And it will develop. I mean, this is our third social values, and it is an organisation one, so we can make reference to some organisation, but this is about what extra our organisation has done in relationship to being an anchor organisation, and it builds on things like our annual report. So the finance is always going to be, we want to put it in there, it's always going to be a secondary nature in relationship to what it's trying to get across. So I think there's some really good comments there, and please keep them coming throughout, you know, throughout the next few weeks, really, because I mean, obviously this is this year's, but we'll be developing it as we go along, so it will grow and it will develop. So, and it has to be inclusive, and obviously we'll utilise Mandy's work, etc., etc. But sincere thanks to Sarah, really, and Kwame for the leadership, but for bringing it together into the document that you can see today, and how it links into our strategy, which obviously everything does. But I think there's a real clear coexistence for them both. I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Thank you, Sarah. I mean, you know, just to pick on one of Mike's things, I think it's an excellent report. I thought it was a really good read, but you know, my eyesight is absolutely appalling. And I just maybe having a look at the accessibility of some of the I think the colours are great, but sometimes when you've got text on background of colours, it doesn't, or it might look good, but it's quite hard to read. So we could just be a little bit, look at that, and font size. I think that would, I someone with very poor eyesight would appreciate it, but I think for others it's quite a difficult challenge as well with lots of public documents today. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks very much. And could you say thank you to everybody, Rachel and everybody involved in this, because I think it's really thorough and I think it's a really great report. Thank you. Hi, Sarah.
It's
okay.
A team effort. It's
fantastic.
Suze Elmore and Rachel Kirby were also very heavily involved in it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Michelle,
thank you.
As well. Michelle as well.
Okay, we'll now go back to the finance report. Pete.
Thanks, Caroline. So this is the month 9 finance report. Some of the headlines from the report before we move to questions, and hopefully my mic's all right now. So I think we're in a strong financial position at month 9. We're on plan with the ICS, and we're on track to achieve a break-even position by the end of the year, which is what we're required to do. You'll see from the report, primary care and agency remain the areas of concern, but we do have a strong focus on that at EMT and also in Finance Committee, and there are some recovery trajectories, but I think it's fair to say the bulk of that recovery will be demonstrable more in 23-24 and part of the financial planning round. And you can see from the report our cash position remains strong, as do our performance against the Better Payment Practice Code. So highlights there, Caroline. Happy if there are any questions.
Thanks very much, Pete. Any questions to Pete, please? I'm holding.
Don't hold too long, Caroline. You can.
Well, you know, sometimes I miss people and then I have to go back. So I'm trying to give people a little bit more time to click on. Okay, no, Pete, people are very satisfied with that report, and it is a good report as usual and very clear. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, Pete. So we'll move on now to the annual declarations report. Stella.
Yes, so the board receives an annual report which shows how we've complied with a number of things in our licence, NHS Act and Constitution. So this provides evidence of how we've met certain requirements. It's been reviewed by EMT, or the evidence has been reviewed by EMT, and it's here for you to have a look at and see whether you think there's anything missing that we should include or not include.
Thanks very much, Stella. Any comments on that report? The only thing I thought, Stella, was just on the governor's side of things was maybe including we have revamped the governor induction pack. And I just thought alongside the other aspects on training, whether that should be included. What do you think?
I can certainly include it in there.
Okay, thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, I said just a really quick one relating to competition oversight. So box C2 on page 162. So the link between competition oversight and the next one about provision of integrated care. Just checking in relation to our collaborative arrangements. It's right, isn't it, that organisations that are in the collaborative have sort of earned their place on the merit, if necessary, through the relevant competitive arrangements, which gets them a kind of a seat at the table in the collaborative. Is that right? And then second question, is that kind of that competition oversight might change as some of the national level regulations on competition emerge, which we looked at in a recent audit committee in terms of emerging competition rules. So just want to check I've got that right at the moment. I see Pete might come into your aid here.
Pete.
Yep. So I think to answer Stuart's question, the contracts within the provider collab were novated and had previously been through a competitive process with NHS England. So yes. I think that kind of hopefully gives the assurance there. And I think the point you're making is when the provider selection regime eventually goes live, should it go live, that may change the evidence we put against this requirement.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Pete, for that explanation. I can't see any other hands up with any questions. So thank you, Stella. Thank you for that report. Just before we go on to the external review governance, just for the record, just to make sure everybody was in favour of the social values report, we have to approve that. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Just for Jenny's notes there. Moving on then to item. Sorry, Stuart.
I did have one more.
Oh, sorry, Stuart. Go on.
No, it's my fault. I kind of forgot to raise it. In the appendix B, line number 3, the very bottom of the right-hand column, it says the well-led review has been commissioned. So is it more correct to say it's been commissioned and responded to and implemented?
Yeah.
I'll update that.
Yeah, you're right.
Thanks.
All done, Stuart?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Stella. If you can just make those amendments that have been raised, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. Moving on to Michelle then, external review of governance action plan update.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, everybody's read the report. I'm going to keep it very simple, very clear. We've most achieved most of the actions. There's a couple that are still ongoing in relationship to Women Speak Up, which we're just closing the loop on those, but there's a detailed action in relationship to them. Obviously, what we're doing now is embedding these and making sure that they're good practice, and we will obviously continue to review that, and it will be picked up in various committee processes and part of our governance processes. But things like the ambassador role in Women Speak Up, that will continue to be more or less a rolling advert. We haven't set a number for ambassadors. We want to get a really good coverage of ambassadors across the organisation. So there's some things that will just continue to be good practice and practice that we continue to do. But the majority of the items are completely complete, and we have got some assurance that they've been embedded as much as they can be at this stage in the organisation. So I'll leave it there unless any of my colleagues want to add anything further, unless there's any questions, Caroline.
Thank you, Michelle. Stuart?
Sorry, old hand. No, I'm very happy with the progress. Sorry, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I can't see any other hands up. So thank you for that, Michelle. We'll move on then to item 14. Have we got Oliver with us? Yes.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to pass over to Oliver. This is our revised board assurance framework. We're used to seeing it. There's a comprehensive update in the report. The committees are well cited on the board assurance framework. Everything comes through the committees up to board, but I'll hand over to Oliver to take us through some of the main aspects for the discussion at the board today. So if that's okay, I'll hand over to Oliver.
Thank you, Michelle. Oliver.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So in terms of the board assurance framework, obviously we represent it to the board on a quarterly basis. So this will in effect be the version for Q3. As Michelle has highlighted, obviously we have revised the document to really bring it in line with the refreshed strategic goals and strategic objectives for the trust. And as part of that work, we have identified some new risks sort of aligned to some of the individual strategic objectives, as well as realign some existing risks from our registers as well. And the idea going forward, and it is very much an ongoing piece of work. This isn't sort of the final iteration. We will continue to refine and improve on this going into Q4 and into next year, is to re-identify principal risks to those objectives so we can really track those going through. They're obviously life cycle and attached to the board assurance framework, but also do that monthly review, that sort of quarterly update as well, just to make sure that we've got the right risks identified. And if things have changed and something else is posing more of a risk to the achievement of those individual objectives, obviously via discussion at EMT and the relevant board subcommittees, we'll pick those risks up and sort of input them into the document and take out anything that doesn't pose quite as much of a risk. So just to make it, to really build on it being as live and as an adaptive a document as it can be. Obviously, there's work ongoing around the strategy monitoring framework and the individual sort of KPIs that will link into the individual strategic goals as well. So that will likely feed into the development of the BAF also, and we might see some additional sort of metrics find their way into the template as we go into Q4. So I suppose for the purposes of today, any comments will be well received, any particular areas that you think we need to consider. Obviously, this does represent the version, as I mentioned, for Q3, but we're obviously willing to take on any comments and any bits that we need to adapt and change going into Q4, which obviously we will now sort of commence following board review today, and I believe it'll be next coming back to March board as the Q4 version. So we've kind of got those 2 months to kind of work on that document and update. So happy to take any sort of comments, any areas that we need to consider, any questions at this stage from anybody, please.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Any questions or comments from board? Stuart.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Oliver. Nice to see you again. Thanks for this report. I've got a comment, and it might be because it's still a bit of it's some work in progress. It's about the description of the, on each page we've got the principal risk to the strategic objectives. So we set out the strategic objectives, then we say the principal risk to them, and many of them are framed at the moment in terms of failure to deliver the strategic objective. So that at the moment, that doesn't really tell me much about what the principal risk is. And looking back at previous versions, we've had a much more specific reference to either a named risk or a collection of risks that threats to blow the achievement of that strategic objective off course. So can you just confirm for me that if you like, we've got a bit of a holding pattern on those descriptions at the moment, is that right?
It's the initial sort of main go at it. We used to do it, but obviously we have risk assessed them. There is obviously a register that kind of sits behind this now as well. So there is sort of, I suppose, the meat to the bones of those descriptions. So I could take that away as an action. Obviously, colleagues from executive management team, I'm sure, will be happy to have a look at those again, and we can consider sort of any tweaks to that. I think the idea kind of going into Q3 and particularly looking at those objectives was to kind of really risk assess each of those objectives as they stood, and to actually give them a score as they sort of stood on their own, but pulling in some of the controls, some of the mitigation, some of the actions from other risks. So as opposed to what we did before, where we were kind of finding the risks that sat on our registers that potentially had that level of impact, it was kind of, I suppose, essentially amalgamating them to have that overarching entry and kind of scoring and sort of seeing where we were for each of those objectives. But I take your point entirely around the sort of description element, and that's something we'll consider, and I really value that feedback, so we'll take that away. But I think, as I've mentioned, obviously going into Q4 and we sort of further refine it, further develop the document, I'm sure that we'll get that to a lot stronger position. I think it's obviously relatively in its infancy in terms of this kind of way of doing it, and it is obviously a revised approach slightly, so obviously we're kind of learning as we go as well, but we'll take those points on board and consider them fully.
Yeah, thank you, because at the moment the description doesn't really add to the read of the document, doesn't really explain what the principal risk is. So if that's work in progress, have a look at that. And then my other question is on, just my understanding really, on the kind of the cover sheet on, that brings together all of the assurance pictures on, it's 194 of the pack. On the developing an effective and empowered workforce, the assurance level is shown as a yellow amber. But on the right-hand column, which shows the progression of the assurance ratings, we've got an orange. We've got a yellow, and then on the left-hand side, an orange amber at the Q3. Now, should that yellow be an orange, if you see what I mean? Not least because we've just had quite a long discussion about overall staff turnover going up, and the principal risk that we see on many parts of our risk registers is staffing or lack of staffing capacity. So just wanted to understand whether we've got that right rating, the assurance level of it as a yellow as opposed to an amber.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the overarching rating, it should be, I think the discussion from the Workforce and OD Committee in November was that it needed to sit at amber. So that's an oversight on the cover sheet, I believe, Stu. I think the overarching rating is amber for the quarter. So what we could do is update the fine. Yeah. I think it's just not been replicated when we've translated it through. So apologies for that, but it should sit as an amber. So we can obviously update the document and recirculate just to make sure that that's clear on that front sheet. And that's no problem at all.
That's fine. Thanks ever so much. And I guess also just to give you a bit of support, each of the subcommittees of the board kind of looks at their strategic objectives. So there's time, isn't it, in those subcommittees to have a look at this to give it a bit of scrutiny as well. So thanks for that. And I know it's a massively complex piece of work you're doing, I think. And so thank you. Take my comments in good faith.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So just remind me, Oliver, who sets the level? Is it the committee then that sets the level?
So
the assurance committee sets the level.
I think typically the approach that we've taken, Steve, is obviously there's discussion via EMT, but obviously with the board subcommittees being, I suppose, essentially the assuring committee for each of these strategic goals, as is detailed in the document. The consideration there would be taken, I suppose, as seriously. And I think, obviously, in terms of the Q3 position, obviously we're slightly out of it now. We're a bit past it. Obviously, we pushed the reporting arrangements into the new year just to give us a bit more time on the document and bringing it in line with the revised approach. Obviously, the outcome, as I was informed from Workforce and OD, was that the view needed to adjust to obviously amber, and then that was obviously reported via EMT. So it would be a combination of both, but the assuring committee has to have some level of say, because obviously they are the assuring committee to the board. They are involved in development of the document, as we have always asked, via the front sheet and via sort of our arrangements. So obviously it's EMT ultimately, but very much influenced by the views of the assuring committee as well, with them obviously taking the assurance and taking obviously any points of evidence and as part of their discussion and their review of the document. So it's a combination of EMT and the relevant assuring committees that will define the ultimate position for the end of quarter.
Happy, Steve?
I'll pick it up outside the meeting, Carol.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much. I can't see any other hands up. I mean, just to echo Stuart's point about the 2 boxes on the strategic objective and principal risk to strategic objectives. I mean, you can see in some of the boxes, Oliver, where actually it's been more specific in the principal risk in isolating, identifying. So, for example, working partnership under enhancing prevention, wellbeing and recovery. We've got working partnership with our staff, patients, service users, continue. And then it goes into that box, the principal risk, talking about the system pressures, adding to an increase of delayed transfers. It gives us a sort of, rather than an absolute, if you like, generic, it gives something more relative to us as an organisation, whilst appreciating, you can't put everything in there, but it helps to isolate and be able to understand what is that principal risk for us, which might be different from another organisation. So, I think, Stuart said it's very difficult to capture everything on one page. But I think if there's some more thought to that, I think, and it has been shown in the document already in some areas, that has been applied and done. And I think it makes for a read in that respect. So, yeah, if you can take that away, that'd be great. And then obviously the other amendment that Stuart raised, thank you very much. So with those changes, is everyone happy to approve the board assurance framework? Thank you. Thanks, Oliver. Good to see you. And we'll see you again for the next item. Hilary, did you want to say something before Oliver presents on that?
Yeah, it says risk register. We've got 5 risks on there that have escalated up to board. 2 have been de-escalated and obviously sitting on the risk registers underneath that. It's all in the paper, but I'll hand over to Oliver if there's anything particularly wanted to pick up from the work that he's done.
Thank you, Hilary.
Oliver, over to you.
Yeah. So the main points I would obviously flag is obviously we've got the 5 entries that currently compose the trust-wide risk register. So any risks with current or net score 15 or above. Obviously 2 workforce entries and 3 from sort of the operations directorate risk register. 2 risks that have been de-escalated, so their scores have been reduced from an initial, current score of 15 to 12. So that's 1 risk there from the finance directorate risk register around overarching financial position. And then the risk from the workforce and OD register, which has been reduced as well. So both of those risks will continue to be reviewed whilst they're open via the relevant directorate arrangements and obviously reported as part of the extracts that will go to both the workforce and OD and finance and investment committee. In terms of sort of wider position for the trust, in terms of composite of the full risk registers, so we've seen a reduction from 182 in September's board report to 169 total risks. We have done sort of deeper dive analysis of that sort of outside of the paper, and it's not an area that's sort of closed off all its risk. It's very much a question of, obviously we've seen closures across the board for some of our clinical areas, but obviously new risks that have been added as well. So it's very much part of the process. Obviously we came to the end of the calendar year, so you do tend to see some risks close off at the later part of the year, and there has been some new additional risks added sort of after this report was pulled together that are going through sort of divisional and directorate governance arrangements at the moment. So it's a moving feast as ever. Obviously we try to represent the position as live as we can, but obviously, you know, it's moving month on month, week on week even sometimes. So you know, we continue to report and review via the operational delivery group, but also the board's sort of governance and divisional governance arrangements as well. So we pick up all those elements. Obviously we continue to do deep dives of the risk registers via the audit committee, where we take sort of the highest rated risks from various divisions at sequential periods throughout the year. And obviously that will continue going into next year. And I think the next, obviously for February's committee, will be taking the divisional risk register extract. So we are making sure that there's good level of oversight and that we're getting the appropriate assurance. And if there's any additional sort of requests or any areas that we need to focus on, we're picking those up as well. So again, happy to take any queries, any questions at this stage. Obviously then we can take them away and consider if there's anything perhaps that's from your perspective, your discussions today that you feel is missing from the document. Happy for us to consider those and take those away as well. Thanks, Oliver. Any comments or queries to Oliver? Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. It's good to see that the sort of the risk assessment is moving a bit and quite under scrutiny all the time. It's good, and you know, just for colleagues. So when at the audit committee, we look at particularly sort of the more detailed risk registers at divisional level. One of our questions is to the teams: how does risk management sit alongside your normal, you know, your management decision making? And the answer's pretty consistently, it's part and parcel of what we do, which is always encouraging to see. I think one improvement that we might consider though is to have just a bit of quantification on some of the risks. So, for example, the CAMS one talks about demand for CAMS beds, you know, and then there's some reference about out of area admissions and so forth. If we just said, you know, of the whatever number it is, 15 beds we've got, you know, 9 are occupied or not occupied, it would just give a bit of context. And so there's always benefit in giving some quantification on some of the risks to give it a bit of meaning for the reader. It might be obvious to you guys who are dealing with this day to day, but for us who are reading it from scratch up, I was sort of doing cross-refer back to some of the other documents to get a sense of the scale of the risk as opposed to its rating only. So otherwise, yeah, that's very helpful to see this as ever. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? No. Oliver, did you want to just comment on Stuart? So you're just going to...
No, of course. I think we are doing a big sort of piece of work around particularly performance-driven metrics and KPIs, and to any risks that, you know, do link to some element of performance, some element of particular sort of performance indicators. We are looking to bring those in. We're working sort of with BI to kind of get a bit of a robust process for that to support all of the risk registers. So I think it's very timely you mentioning that, Stuart, and obviously I'd like to sort of give some assurance that that works in train, and hopefully next time you'll see it, you'll be able to see that quite clearly. That they're all sort of compounded in the risk entries as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Oliver. See you again soon, no doubt.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, Catherine's joined us. So what I'm intending to do, because we're a bit ahead of schedule, is take Catherine item on the agenda, and then we'll have a 5-minute break after that. So if that's all right, is that okay with everybody? Yeah, okay, lovely, thank you. Catherine, welcome.
Morning.
You caught me just putting my feet in my foot warmer. Kwame, sorry, did you want to introduce? I'm trying to get to the presenters here. Sorry, Kwame.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's all right. Catherine, welcome. Catherine is Assistant Director of Research and hardworking. This is an update Catherine is giving on the research and development. This is a 6-monthly update. I'm sure those of you who followed our research conference would clearly see that we're punching above our weight in research, but hopefully clearly we can do more. I think the report is to look at all the opportunities that we give to our community in terms of participation, and also to provide some assurance to the board around our obligation with the National Institute of Research, Health and Research portfolios and how we target against that. It also highlights some ideas around how we use research to meet our strategy. Catherine, welcome to the board, and I'll give you the opportunity to expand on the report.
Thanks, Kwame. Catherine.
Thank you for having me as usual. I'll just highlight a few bits in the report. I assume you've had a chance to skim through it. So if I just start at section 1, which is around performance, we've been doing really good stuff this past year or so with our GP practices, with a national target of getting 45% of GP practices involved in research. We've actually managed 100% of our practices, and actually regionally only 29% of practices are involved in research. So I think that's something worth celebrating this past year. And in terms of performance, in the past years, it's always been around recruitment numbers, and that's been very black and white. It's been, our funding has been based on numbers of people into studies, and our performance targets have been based around that. But there's a move nationally to a performance target called recruitment to time and target. So it's actually about agreeing a target for a national study, what we think is realistic to achieve, and actually recruiting in the time frame that we say we're going to do. And that's going to affect our funding moving forwards. And I'm actually really pleased to report that for quite a lot of years now, we've been performing really well with recruitment to time and target. So that's a positive, and the funding for next year has got quite a big proportion that's based on that. So we should do, the official figures aren't out yet, but we should do quite well on that. Just moving on to governance, it seems quite a long time ago now. It was actually in June last year we had our annual performance review from the Yorkshire and Humber Clinical Research Network, where we get most of our funding from. And it was an incredibly positive review. I put a few comments there that they fed back to us, so I won't read through those. We're also, I don't know whether some of you remember this, but we've agreed to be a host for a lot of regional research posts across Yorkshire and Humber. I think there's 3 trusts that host the posts, and we're the one that was chosen for the Humber and North Yorkshire ICS area. We've now got 7 of those posts in place, and there'll be a few more in the coming year. So that's been quite a success this year, and has brought some extra opportunities into the trust with that as well. There's a few things under governance that are a bit more about policy and indemnity and things. I won't go through those, but it's just providing some assurance. The CQC in their new single assessment framework has still got research in there, so it's still something we need to make sure that our clinical teams are focusing on. Just going on to the research strategy and national vision, we're continuing to in our research strategy, it seems to be mirroring the national picture. So things that are coming out, for example, from the Royal College of Physicians, and they issued a joint statement with the NIHR all about embedding research in clinical practice. And that's something that we actually focus very much on in our research strategy. Something else we've managed to achieve this past 6 months is getting our research team to be classed as part of the clinical team for the purposes of research and screening patients for studies, which is going to enhance the number of people that we can get into the studies. That did go through the information governance group and Hilary as Caldecott Guardian, and we are monitoring how that's going, but it seems to be really positively received so far, because we know clinicians are really busy and sometimes research does get forgotten sometimes, just because there's so much that clinicians have got to remember at every consultation. So if we as a research team can do some of that, that's really great. So we've been approaching hundreds and hundreds of patients that wouldn't have been approached for research. So that's been a real positive. Moving on to section 4, in terms of our funding, we got the core funding for this past year, approximately 360k to help support research through our clinical research network, but we were also successful in a few other business cases, particularly in supporting primary care and some support for pharmacy, because we'd really like to get pharmacy more involved in research and the opportunities for bringing in the kind of commercial research as well. We also have been really successful with a very small pot of £20,000 in funding a bit of clinical time to develop some grant applications, and a couple of those have actually been funded now. One is around co-producing a nature-based intervention for children with ADHD, and one is around producing digital resources to help get research findings out there to the people that were involved in research. What else is there under there? Something that is really going to benefit the trust moving forward is the national decision to change the formula for funding excess treatment costs. So that's where a piece of research, the intervention, actually costs more than standard treatment would cost. So the difference between standard treatment and the new treatment is what's known as the excess treatment cost. Now, previously, there was a kind of, each trust had to pay a percentage of that excess treatment cost as part of their standard process. That percentage is massively reduced. It was, let me get this right, it was 0.01% of operating budget. It's now 0.001%, which means there's hardly any cost that we have to subsume anymore, and it means we can get more funding, excess treatment costs, into our clinical services when they're taking part in research. So that's a huge positive for us. It has been this year and it will be next year as well. In terms of opportunities, we're continuing to bring more of our clinical services into research that haven't necessarily been involved before. So, for example, we've got a diabetes study at the moment, which is specifically around self-management of diabetes, but for people with mental health issues. So it's kind of combining, you know, the kind of community physical health stuff we do and the mental health stuff we do, which is really great. And we've also been selected as a national pilot site for what's called the Research Ready Communities Initiative. And Hull has been selected for this. So we're working with various organisations to bring communities more into research and have research champions in communities. So things like the Peel Project, trying to get out to Hull Mosque and all sorts of places and just bring people into research when traditionally that's maybe been quite hard for them. And then we obviously had our successful research conference. We had more people register this year than we have in the past. We've also got an agreement in place with the Jean Bishop Integrated Care Centre so that we can help them get more engaged in research and studies that we have open in our trust. We can recruit patients from their centre into our research studies, which means we're starting to work much more effectively across the place and the healthcare partnership. which is really great. And obviously the Jean Bishop Centre is a bit in the spotlight at the moment, because I don't know whether any of you saw the Panorama programme last week, which was really great and is about, you know, trying to get people into a service and have a one-stop shop, and actually research fits really well into that, because we're another service that can be part of that one-stop shop. So we're really chuffed that we've got agreements in place with that, and the Clinical Research Network is supporting us with that moving forwards. And we're really pleased that we've managed to support 4 student nurses this past year as well, and we're continuing to do that moving forward. Hopefully my next report will be able to talk about a national pilot that we're going to be involved in around student nurses and supporting them specifically around research, but more of that in the future. And that's probably about it. There's an appendix with all the list of studies.
Wow. Catherine, honestly, yourself and your team, you know, every time we have these reports, and also obviously the events that some of us have been privileged to be involved in, what really comes across is how, you know, well, apart from the quality, just how innovative and entrepreneurial your team are in terms of seeking out the opportunities to build, you know, the capacity, but also our reputation in this area. And I'm sure it was music to the ears of some of my colleagues about the fact that we are going to benefit from some extra funding into certain areas as part of this excess formula that you very clearly described. So, I mean, I think it's terrific. I really do. And I sort of, just to ask is maybe how, you know, we can capture just the impact of all this on our staff in terms of that's why they like to work here, because there is this going on. And I think it's because I think that's such an important element of what this is providing for patients first, but also the development of staff, and as a good place to be engaged work here as well. Maybe that's something that we can think about capturing. Michelle's nodding, because I think it's a real plus for the trust. So thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? Michelle?
No, I mean, obviously I declared an interest right at the beginning. It's under the declaration that I chair the CRM, but obviously I'd echo your thoughts from Catherine. Just to say, I think it's a really good point that we've not thought about, which is about adding it to the benefits booklet in relationship to why it's good to work at Humber. So I'm sure Catherine will take that away and speak to Rachel. It's a really, really good point. So we will take that forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Stuart.
Can I just respond to
Catherine?
We've actually just got research now on the Unbelievable website as part of the recruitment information. We've got a section about research. It's only just gone on there in the past month or two, and we've now got it in the medics recruitment information. Research is now in.
Oh, Catherine, we've lost you. You've gone mute.
Oh my God, what's happening?
Positive.
Catherine, can you hear me?
I suspect. Okay, you're back. I was going to say that that's what we've done in the Humber Believable, and also we're making a research in the column where we're trying to recruit doctors, that there's an opportunity for you to be able to take part into research and groundbreaking research if you want to come and join us in this organization. Okay. Catherine, are you back?
Catherine, are you back? We lost you there. We lost volume. We lost audio.
Sorry, I could hear you when I was talking away.
No, it was wonderful. Wonderful. Kwame picked up for you very well there to complete what I think you were going to say. But yeah, no, that's really good to be using those avenues and getting in there. Thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, morning, Catherine. Great report. Very exciting to hear all this stuff that's going on. My question is about how do you choose what to research in? So kind of, do you chase the money? Do you chase national policy? And I'm particularly interested in, a lot of the time in this board and elsewhere, we discuss the kind of challenges facing the trust, many of which are not to do with clinical research areas, but staffing areas, for example. But what's the process by which you choose to investigate an area? And are there lines of investigation that you'd really like to do, but you haven't got yet, you're sighted on?
Yeah, good question. So most of the research we're involved in comes to us nationally. So it's all the big national studies. So many years ago, there was a change from doing lots of local projects because they were never properly powered statistically. People were doing lots of little things and it was never big enough to show any difference or to have any kind of meaningful results. So there was a move quite a lot of years ago to go to doing a lot more nationally together. So most of our research is part of multi-centre research. So there's lots of trusts all around the country doing it, and we're just one site for that research. So what the expectation is, because we have some funding for research, that if a project comes along that we've got the patient population for and we've got the capacity to do it, then the expectation is that we should do it. But then there's also some local clinicians that are research active and are developing research grants themselves, but they will develop that grant, and it might be something that they've got an interest in, but they always develop it with patient and public interest groups. So it's never done in isolation. And usually that research, it might be pilot that only takes place in the trust, but then it will lead to hopefully getting funding to do it on a much bigger scale. So for example, the ADHD one that I mentioned, that initially is a smallish grant, but the chances are that's going to lead to a very big randomized control trial that will involve lots of trusts nationally. So there's a bit of local influence, but a lot of it is the national picture, and generally what the main issues are nationally are also issues for us. But also there's a move to trying to get a lot more research into Hull and East Yorkshire, because actually historically the bigger centres tend to forget this area. So we've been doing a lot over the years to shout about our trust and say, you know, hey, don't forget about us. We've got a lot of health conditions that, you know, are of real interest, and don't just focus on particular trusts that you've always worked with. So I think that's what we're getting a bit better at.
So there's a bit of research levelling up going on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Kwame.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that when we've looked at something like drug research, so phase 3 and phase 4 research, and what we're picking up, myself and Liat and Catherine, is that if you're in the game, you get more research. And what we're doing is to try and get our first or second, which means that then all the centers then tend to us to get more. So that's some of the things that we're trying to do, is to shine the light on us a little bit, spotlight, and like you say, level up a little bit for us.
Thank you, Kwame. Okay. Thank you, Catherine. You know, all the best. Keep up the good work. Not that I have to say that to you. And pleasure as always. So thank you. Okay, so thanks, Catherine. So we'll take a 5-minute break now and come back in 5 minutes at about 11:19. 20. And so if we can stop streaming, and we'll start again shortly. And welcome back. We're reconvening the Humber Trust board meeting for January, and we are on item number 17. Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Hopefully people have had a chance to read the strategy. This is the Integrated Care Partnership strategy, but obviously the Integrated Care Partnership have written this on behalf of the Integrated Care System, and it was presented to the Integrated Care Board, excuse me for all that complexity, a couple of weeks ago and approved, so hence it's in front of you today. We have sent some of our comments back, which I think have previously been circulated around the board. I think some of them have been taken on board. So obviously what the strategy is doing is looking at the ambition of the integrated care system, which is around the population health, living longer, healthier lives, and with the premise of sort of starting well in life, living well, aging well, and then having end of life care well, and looking at sort of improving outcomes, all based around health inequalities, population health, but tackling that inequalities, but also with an underpinning strand of improving and enhancing productivity. It's a word that we'll hear, I believe, a lot this year in relationship to both the operational plan, but also in strategies and documents, so enhancing productivity and supporting the broader economic framework, because obviously the partnership is there to work collectively with partners across the six geographical places. So I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's about thinking person, it's about thinking family, and it's about thinking community. And the strategy had to be put together quite quickly. And that was at the request of NHS England when NHS the Act came in, and when the new establishment order came in for integrated care system. So I'm sure this won't be the last reiteration that we see, but they had to have it completed by December. So I know it's had a very limited consultation process. So I'm not apologising on behalf of the Integrated Care Partnership, but that was one of the reasons why it was. But it gives you a bit of an idea about the geographical patch, a bit about the area. And what I have asked the Integrated Care Boards to do is in future iterations to be really mindful of linking it into current provider organisation strategy as well, but also that consultation and engagement piece. I could say more, Chair, but I'll stop there because I'm sure people have read the comments. I'll try and answer the question. Obviously, it's not my document. I'm presenting it here for the board, but we did get a short consultation period. It literally was a very, very short consultation window, and we did offer comments back, but I'll throw it open to any observations, and I can take those back to the Integrated Care Board, and I will do. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I know a number of colleagues on the board provided you with some comments, and you know, given the circumstances you've explained, presumably those comments will be carried forward, and you know, we can work on that on a future sort of development of this strategy. Francis.
Thanks, Chair. I do like the start well, live well, age well, and I think all that bit's nice and flows, and you can understand it well. Another comment I've thought about since we've put in earlier was that it talks, it's got a set of bullet points further on about the principle agreed by the strategy design group. And I think one that's not in there is about being cost effective and ensuring that it is cost effective. And if you link that to then aging well, obviously with an aging population, even if they're aging well, it's going to become more expensive because we'll have more people needing more treatment longer and less people coming through from a younger age to fund that. So again, just to think about that. I like the create conditions, think person, think family, think community. And I think now the big question is turning it all into action. As it says, it's a great top line. Here's what we aspire to do. It's whether you then turn that into an actionable plan, which actually delivers on all those really nice things that they've said.
Yeah, I could see Michelle nodding to both those comments there on the cost effectiveness in particular. So there's a thumbs up there again for Michelle too. Thanks, Francis. Any other comments from colleagues? Great. Okay, thank you, Michelle. That's really helpful, and it's good to see it here and something to look at and work with. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, and that is the Assurance Committee reports. And we'll start with Stuart on the Collaborative Committee Assurance report, please.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'll take the paper as read. We kind of rehearsed some of this in Michelle's report about the positive news about the Schön Clinic moving into a much stronger position. Otherwise, things to bring to your attention to are kind of partly about us as our commissioning team actually holding one of our internal units, Inspire to account. There's some work going on between the commissioning planning team, the collaborative planning team, and Inspire to make sure we can free up a bit more capacity there. Otherwise, as you can see, we're getting good progress reports across the 3 work streams. We had some kind of procedural items to reconfirm terms of reference and look at other things that kind of about ways of working, getting some positive feedback from the national team about our work, and on the whole kind of going in the right direction, with the exception of kind of some overspend appearing in the CAMS area and some capacity issues, which seem to be a common theme across the work. And I'll stop there. We have another collaborative meeting coming up quite soon, and things will continue to move on.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Any questions, comments to Stuart? Nope. Thank you very much, Stuart. Francis, Finance and Investment Committee.
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep it brief because we've already had Pete's finance report, and a lot of this it says the same as his finance report, to be fair. The only things I'll pull out is the NHS and ICS deficit positions at month 8, the IR35 work that's been going on, and the fact that that might cause us ongoing financial and workforce pressures. We got very good assurance as a committee in a lot of other areas and complimented the team on the excellent papers they put together, which generate some really good discussions. We're getting into some really good discussions now based upon the positivity of the papers that are being provided. And the other thing I'll pull out is that we had a discussion around the latest planning advice and the Trust 23-24 programme for putting together that plan, which obviously is in its infancy at the moment, but you'll see in the report there some of the technical guidance that's been issued and how that's going to impact on us going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Francis. Any questions? No. Thank you very much, Francis. Moving on then to Charitable Funds Committee. Stuart.
Right, so we've got kind of we're moving now into kind of corporate trustee mode in relation to the charity as a group now. My report back from the committee, which met in mid-December, shows that we know that we're not performing too well this year in terms of fundraising. We know that we're tackling that through work underway, which we'll report back to our next board. Against that backdrop, we continue to spend money, so we're using the funds accumulated. Spending to date at the time of the meeting was £105,000, and we'd received a healthy £10,000 from a League of Friends in Malton. But our kind of key challenge is to get our fundraising up again. We continue to do work to make the process of converting wishes into action a bit slicker. And the teams are working together on that, and we're also encouraging the zone managers, so the people responsible for each area of funding, to utilise the funds available more rapidly, and indeed now to report back to us at each meeting on how they're doing. So against that backdrop, again, another meeting coming up quite soon, work in hand with the Smile Foundation to improve their performance, and I'll stop there to take any further questions.
Any questions? No? Okay, that report is noted. Now we move on to the charitable funds accounts, which is requiring approval, and we're doing this as corporate trustee, the board as corporate trustee. Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Apologies if the language in the front sheet of the report doesn't clarify that. It's the board as the corporate trustee approving accounts. I think it's important to capture that as the minutes. These are the accounts that went to Charitable Funds Committee. They're due to be filed on the 31st of January, subject to the board as the corporate trustee approving them today, and they have been independently examined by the accountants.
And I'll stop there, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on these?
And just to give you some colleagues, just some assurance, at the funds committee, we spent a bit of time reviewing the narrative. I mean, the numbers are the numbers at this stage in the process, subject to the audit. They're baked in. We took some time to just make sure the narrative was up to date. So on behalf of that committee, I can give you some assurance as the corporate trustee that we've done that work in the committee in December.
Thanks, Stuart. Mike.
Just building on what's been said about corporate trustee, we just need 1 or 2 changes within the report. So we've got report of the trustees, plural. So the whole report is the report of the corporate trustee. The introduction refers to the trustees. So if Pete could just work through that and just make sense of it, please.
Thank you, Mike. Pete, are you all right? If you can take forward some of those changes.
Yeah, more than happy to work on that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Does the corporate trustee, the board as corporate trustee, approve the accounts before you, the charitable funds? Yes. Great. That's got the approval of the corporate trustee. Thank you. Moving on then. I think we've got Tracy with us. Yes, Tracy's with us. We've got the review of safer staffing inpatients units. Hilary, would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Caroline. So it's the usual 6-month report looking back over the previous 6 months. Not shouldn't be any surprises in here. As we say, we report every month, don't we, to the board through the performance dashboard. I'm going to hand over to Tracy if there's anything she wants to actually pull out the report to make the board aware.
Thank you. Tracy, welcome.
Morning, thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Okay, so this is the report for April 2022 to September 2022. Apologies, it is a little confused in the introduction and on the cover sheet, but it's saying that it's March 2022 to September. It's actually the April 2022 to September 2022 report. And it outlines the performance against our existing care hour per patient day targets and KPIs for the previous reporting period. Just to say about the care hour per patient day targets, they were reviewed and an agreement that they were revised upwards in July. This was in line with overall rises in care hour per patient day nationally, as are reported via the model health system, and also in line with our own local rise in care hour per patient day since the beginning of that reporting nationally back in 2019. However, it was only revised temporarily on the basis that for this round of safe staffing reviews, we would actually look at collecting dependency data locally with each of the teams and feeding that into their safer staffing reviews, incorporating that with discussion and professional judgment, and agreeing local care hour per patient day targets for each unit. So they're presented within this report. They've also been discussed and now agreed at EMT, and those new revised targets have been incorporated into the safer staffing dashboard from January. So there was a sort of a period of transition. For the purposes of this report, we're using the previous care hour per patient day target, which was 8.9. As part of the reviews, as I've said, all the wards were asked to collect dependency data, and where they'd been able to do that, that's 21 days of data that was fed into the evidence-based tools that we have available to us. And those tools, not in their entirety, but the majority of them, the MHOS tool particularly, allows us then to look at calculating a recommended care hour per patient day. And that was then discussed with each of the teams in the context of their other key performance indicators and quality indicators, and the sort of local, more subjective view, I guess, of how safe it felt on those units. So the main body of the report goes on to sort of discuss some of the key findings around the areas that we look at. So the fill rates are discussed, the care hour per patient day discussed, some of the quality indicators, and then there's a breakdown of each of the individual wards, and it shows their position against those areas of assurance that we're looking at. And we have a sort of a rating mechanism where we determine, based on the number of areas where each individual ward is maybe showing less assurance, so they're not meeting the indicators at the minimum target, we give them a rating of either low, adequate or good assurance. So for this reporting period, all of the wards with the exception of 3 were reporting good assurance. The 3 wards that were reporting adequate assurance were Town End Court, Inspire and Swale. Just to point out on page 317 in the actual body of the report in relation to Swale, it does say that they're providing good assurance, but actually they're not meeting their minimum target around supervision, appraisals and sickness. So that in the body of the narrative on page 317 it should say adequate assurance, but it is correctly represented in the assurance overview table on page 312. So the 3 areas that are demonstrating adequate assurance, Town End Court has an ongoing issue around their fill rates, which is what which continues to contribute to their adequate rating. However, since this the reporting period and as part of the last Safer Staffing review, they have now integrated the e-rosters for Willow and Lilac. So previously there were 2 separate rosters for the 2 units, even though they've got very small numbers of patients on each of the units. And for some time they've been amalgamating their staffing resource to cover the whole of the unit. So now that that's been addressed on the e-roster, we should start to see an improvement in how the fill rates are reported and more adequately reflect how they're using the staffing resource flexibly across those 2 units. So although they have very small numbers of patients, they often have patients with very high levels of acuity. And as has continued to be the case for Town End Court, their care hour per patient day remains strong. It's one of the areas that reports to the highest levels of care hour per patient day, which is where we get a lot of our assurance. But Inspire, again, the reason that they're presenting with only adequate assurance is in relation to their fill rates. And Nova was closed at the end of September, which means that the actual hours that are available from Nova will now be incorporated into Orion's actual hours. So that should address the issues for them around their fill rates as well. But again, what we see consistently with us Inspire is that they perform very well against our other units within the organisation in terms of their care hour per patient day, and that's also reflected in how they benchmark nationally against other CAMS inpatient units. So their care hour per patient day does remain strong, and a lot of work's been done with Inspire to look at that staffing model to ensure that it's actually reflecting the levels of acuity and dependency that they've got. So that position with Inspire should improve. And the final unit that was showing adequate assurance was Swale, and that was in relation predominantly to their appraisals and their supervision, both of which had improved above the target by the end of Q2. So in terms of the recommendations that we continue to look at how we use the evidence-based tools as effectively as we can. We have got a commitment from NHS England that they will come and provide us with some training around how we are using the tools to collect the dependency data. So basically this is training that will support at a team level the band 6s and the band 7s that collect that dependency data for that 21-day period that then feeds into the Safer Staffing reviews to ensure that there's rate of reliability, so that we're absolutely maximising the potential of that tool to give us good recommendations about our care hour per patient day. So that training will be rolled out to the matrons initially, and then we will have a cascade train the trainer approach, so that we will train the band 7s and the band 6s. I'm already working on a schedule in my new role so that we will also this time round we will collect all the dependency data within the same window. So previously the units have collected the dependency data based on when their Safer Staffing review was due. By consolidating it into one window, it means that we've all got eyes on supporting the teams and making sure that they've got everything they need in place to complete that dependency data, because it is really critical and is getting these the discussions at the Safer Staffing reviews based on the best evidence that we've got about their local dependency, and we know that that might change over sort of subsequent reporting periods. So that will be a big initiative for this year. Will be about training getting the trainer programme rolled out, and then obviously into the next round of dependency data collection and the safer staffing reviews, we should really be enhancing our opportunities to make sure that we're getting really local, good knowledge and information that allows us to review those care hour per patient day thresholds and the safer staffing establishments that are required to achieve those minimum staffing levels. I'll stop there, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any questions to Tracy? I have one, Tracy, which is in relation to Inspire. Obviously, the report identifies that bed occupancy has dropped, and I know there's, in other reports we've obviously had comment on that. If bed occupancy increases, obviously we want to be able to use all available beds. How does that impact on these issues of safer staffing? Is that being obviously there's almost a benefit in some respects because of under occupancy, which you highlight in your report. Thanks for that. But I just wondered about where that fits in, because we want to aspire for Inspire to actually have full occupancy.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely from a safer staffing point of view, a lower bed occupancy increases the care hour per patient day. So we've got more available staffing for each individual that's on the unit. What the tool does, though, is that when we go into the next round of dependency data collection, the tool takes into account how many patients have been on that unit over the 21-day period. So as we see that increase in occupancy, which we're expecting to see with Inspire, that will be reflected then in the dependency data collection and how the care hour per patient day recommendations are calculated. Obviously, if the bed occupancy remains lower, the care hour per patient day, you still have that balance. So if you're over the 21-day period of data collection, we're still only at 60-70% bed occupancy. That will come through in the recommended care hour per patient day. But if we see that occupancy increasing, then that will be reflected in those subsequent dependency data collection periods. And if we're seeing that rise quite exponentially, then we can always factor in another period of dependency data collection, if that makes sense. So we don't have to wait, we don't have to do it in that 6-monthly cycle. We can tailor it if we're seeing that sort of change, more dramatic change that we want to sort of reflect and understand in how we're modelling the staffing.
Thank you, Tracy. Kwame.
Yeah, no, it's a good report, and it's an attempt to try and bring some science into safer staffing, which is good. I wonder, not for me to, I want not plug in for our single site conversation, but in terms of comparing other trusts, is the fact that we have single units in a council estate affect our comparison? Because I can see if you have 5 or 6 units, you could have one junior doctor who could, for example, walk around the whole unit with us. Whereas if you have units which are 30 minutes apart, then you tend to have a bit more staff. I wonder how that reflects on our figures.
Thanks, Kwame. Tracy?
No, thanks, Kwame. I think that's a really important point, and certainly one that we know that the way that we consider our safer staffing levels in the Humber Centre, for example, is different to how we'd think about safer staffing on New Bridges and Westlands, because they do have, the wherewithal to have a response team, for example, on site, which means that, there's always a different, way of thinking about the staff you've got to pull on. The tools don't necessarily reflect whether the unit is standalone or as part of a setting where there's several units on site. However, the professional judgment conversation very much does, and that's where you would provide that unique context of that ward with the staffing team who would be able to give you the sort of like the impact and the consequences of being sort of isolated, and that would then figure into how we would make a decision collaboratively based on the evidence from the tool, but also based on what the team are telling us about their sort of unique circumstances. So yeah, thank you.
Stuart.
Yeah, hi Tracy. This might be a question for you or others on the call. I was really interested in the detail of the report, and I think that link to kind of occupancy is really important to us for us to understand it. My question is about, on the front sheet, you say that 3 units require a business case to be developed to look at increasing their budgeted establishment. My question is about the process by which that decision is made. How does that play into our annual financial planning process, or is it something that happens kind of within the year?
Do you want me to answer, Tracy?
That would be, I'm happy to start, but yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Pete. That would be
it would fit into our financial planning process and form part of what we call our commissioning intentions conversation with Commissioner Stewart. So we rank our priorities. We know there'll be a modest level of growth under the mental health investment standard. And if safer staffing is our number 1 priority, that would be what we would be requesting as first call against the mental health investment standard.
So there's an interplay between the ask at the safer staffing level and then the constraint that might be at the resourcing level?
Yes. But then I guess what I would say is we are probably staffing to safer staffing now within the report. So we're probably incurring some of those cost pressures because we staff our wards safely. But it does form part of the planning conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. That was it.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Tracy, did you want to add anything there?
Yes, just to say, I think a really good example of that is Swale, where they are actually maintaining safer staffing levels, but there is a cost pressure associated with that because they're using additional bank and to cover that. So I think there's the assurance there that the safe staffing levels are being met, but that's not a sustainable position in terms of finance. So that's where then those discussions would come in with commissioners about what we need to do and how we can. And obviously the tools are a real strength for us there because they provide us with the evidence that our staffing model is directly aligned to the level of acuity and dependency, which we know has and does change.
That's really helpful example, Tracy, as where we're filling what we need, we're providing for what we need to do in relation to safer staffing, but actually the challenge of doing that and its impact is understanding that is really helpful. That's a really good example. Thank you. Tracy, thank you very much for a very clear presentation and a very thorough report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to item 23. You have before you the agenda for our next board strategic development meeting. Are there any questions? No? Great. And you'll notice that we'll be having a good discussion about the primary care plan at that meeting, which I know was requested before, and we're going to have it there. Okay, I haven't been notified of any items to escalate. I haven't had any other urgent business put before me. In terms of the review of the meeting, welcome any comments about the agenda, the quality of the papers, presentations, and whether you feel that we have delivered our role to scrutinise clearly and challenge today. Any comments? Oh, everybody feels we ticked all those boxes. Happy with the reports? Happy with the presentations? Everyone feels they've had an opportunity to contribute. Great. Good. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. And that brings us to the end. Oh, Mike. I see Mike's hand go up there.
Say, I think we've been Humber today, so well done.
Thank you.
It's been a convivial meeting, and it's been a good degree of challenge and some very detailed stuff, which I do admire. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Well done, everybody. Good board meeting. We now close the public board meeting. I hope those who are either watching this now or later found it of interest, and there's more information about everything we do on our website. So I will close the public board meeting for today. Thank you very much.